If someone had asked me a year ago what happiness looked like, I would have pointed to my life. A cozy suburban home with a white picket fence, a loyal golden retriever named Milo, and a husband who still kissed me on the forehead every morning before work. I was Emily Carter, 32, a marketing consultant with a small circle of close friends and a marriage most people envied. Daniel, my husband of 4 years, was everything I thought a partner should be: driven, intelligent, considerate, and effortlessly charming. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 4, and though we hadn't yet been blessed with children, we were trying, eagerly, hopefully. Daniel and I met in a bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of The Alchemist. That cliched spark people always talk about. We had it. He was the man who made me laugh during funerals and hold my breath during fireworks. He remembered my coffee order, left notes in my purse, and danced with me in the kitchen on rainy nights. We weren't perfect, of course, but we were close enough to believe in it. My younger sister, Sarah, had recently moved back into town after spending years abroad teaching yoga retreats in Bali and Costa Rica. At 27, she was a whirlwind, free-spirited, passionate, and impulsive. Growing up, she was the fire to my calm, the chaos to my order. We had our differences, but we were always close in our own messy, sisterly way. She had nowhere else to stay when she returned, so of course I offered her our guest room, happy to have family close again. As my birthday approached, Daniel planned a small dinner to celebrate. He invited my parents, my best friend Maya, and of course Sarah. I remember feeling warm with gratitude as I stood in front of the mirror, touching up my makeup before the dinner, thinking, I'm so lucky. Everything is exactly how it should be. The house was filled with laughter that evening. Wine glasses clinked, candles flickered, and Daniel was at my side, his hand on the small of my back. Sarah joked and smiled like she always did, and my parents beamed at how grown-up we all seemed now. It felt like the perfect picture, one I would have framed in my heart forever. But perfection is a fragile illusion, and mine was already cracking in places I couldn't yet see. It started with small things, so small, in fact, that I barely noticed them at first. Daniel began coming home later than usual, offering vague excuses about client dinners or last-minute meetings. Normally, he was meticulous about our evening routines, dinner by 7, followed by a movie or walk with Milo. But now, he'd quietly creep into the house around 9 or 10, kiss me on the cheek, and mutter, "Long day," before heading straight for the shower. I'd ask about his day, but his answers were clipped, distracted, like he was only half there. I told myself not to worry. He was under pressure at work, they were taking on a new merger, and he was heading a team. That's what he said, and I believed him, because I trusted him. Or, at least, I wanted to. Sarah was still living with us, having taken up temporary residence in our guest room. She always said she wouldn't overstay her welcome, and yet weeks turned into months. I didn't mind at first, she was my sister, after all. But something shifted between her and Daniel. At first, I chalked it up to her being friendly. Too friendly. There were glances, quick, fleeting, but strange. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found her laughing at something Daniel had whispered. Her hand lingered on his shoulder longer than it should have. They both froze when they noticed me, like they'd been caught mid-sentence in a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I tried not to read into it. Later, I mentioned it to Maya over coffee. She raised a brow and gave me a look I couldn't quite decipher. "You don't think that's odd?" she asked. "I mean, Sarah's always been intense. But she's gotten kind of clingy with Daniel. Like, have you seen the way she looks at him?" I laughed it off. "Don't be ridiculous. She's my sister. And Daniel would never." But the words hung in the air longer than they should have. I found myself replaying certain moments in my head. Sarah sitting too close to him on the couch. her wearing one of my robes as she walked into the kitchen while Daniel made breakfast. The time she posted a picture on Instagram of the three of us with the caption #HomeVibes, but she'd cropped me out in the thumbnail preview. I wanted to believe I was being paranoid. That I was overanalyzing. So I buried it, told myself I was being silly. I blamed hormones, stress, the pressure of trying to conceive. I made excuses, for Daniel, for Sarah, for the tightness I felt in my chest whenever I saw them together and couldn't quite explain why. But deep down, a quiet voice had begun to whisper, something isn't right. And I was just too scared to listen. The evening was warm, golden with late summer light streaming through the windows as my family gathered around the long oak dining table. Daniel had gone out of his way to make it special. He cooked dinner himself, even ordered my favorite chocolate mousse cake from the bakery downtown. Everything looked picture perfect. Wine glasses twinkled, candles flickered softly, and laughter filled the air. I remember thinking, this is what happiness feels like. My parents sat across from me, beaming. Maya, always the life of the party, was telling a story about a disastrous Tinder date. Sarah sat to my right, sipping wine, smiling too much, a strange sparkle in her eyes. Daniel sat on my left, his hand occasionally brushing my arm, his attention divided but present. When dinner ended and dessert was served, I stood to give a short toast. I didn't prepare anything fancy, just a few words of gratitude. I'm so thankful for everyone here, I said, holding my wine glass. To be surrounded by the people I love most in the world, it means more than I can say. Here's to family, love, and everything good in between. There were smiles. Toasts. A few claps. I sat back down, my heart full. That's when Sarah stood up. She didn't hold a glass or smile sheepishly the way she usually did when the spotlight found her. Her face was pale, her hands visibly trembling. I have something to say, she began, and the table fell quiet. My father looked up from his cake. Maya tilted her head. Daniel straightened in his chair ever so slightly. I didn't plan this, Sarah said, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I can't hide it anymore. She looked directly at me. I'm pregnant, she said. And Daniel is the father. The world slowed. My brain couldn't catch up with her words. For a moment, I thought she was joking, some terrible, tasteless prank. But no one laughed. Everyone froze. I turned to Daniel. His face had gone completely white. His lips parted but no words came. Sarah, I said slowly, blinking, what are you talking about? It's true, she whispered. We, Daniel and I. No, Daniel finally said. No, this isn't. I don't know what she's talking about. But Sarah was ready. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. Photos. Screenshots. Text messages. Messages like, you're the only one who understands me. Last night was everything. You promised you'd talk to her soon. Photos of the two of them, too intimate to deny. Her in his hoodie. Him kissing her neck in what looked like a hotel room. I couldn't breathe. My ears buzzed. I stood up slowly, pushing back my chair. Everyone stared at me, waiting, perhaps for a scream or tears. But I said only this. You didn't just destroy a marriage, you buried your own soul under betrayal. The silence after that was bottomless. Sarah's face crumpled, but I didn't care. Daniel reached out as if to touch my arm, to explain, but I stepped back. I picked up my purse, my keys, and I walked to the door without another word. The last thing I heard was the sound of my mother sobbing and Maya whispering, "Oh my God." I didn't look back. Not once. The silence of the hotel room was a strange kind of punishment. Too clean, too sterile. The hum of the air conditioning filled the emptiness where Daniel's laughter used to be. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours that night, fully clothed, still wearing my makeup and the heels I'd picked out so carefully for my birthday dinner, what was supposed to be my day. My hands trembled, my thoughts scattered, and my heart, it didn't feel broken. It felt obliterated. I couldn't cry at first. Shock is cruel like that. It keeps the tears at bay while your brain replays everything you thought was real, only to slowly unravel it. I kept seeing flashes, Daniel dancing with me on our anniversary, the time we painted the nursery room we never filled, the way he kissed my forehead every morning. How do you fake love like that? By morning, my phone had exploded with messages. My mother sent me a string of crying emojis and promises of support. My father wrote, "We're praying for clarity and healing, remember, marriage is sacred." Maya texted, "Say the word and I'll come set his car on fire." I smiled weakly at that, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Daniel called 12 times. Left voicemails I couldn't bear to listen to. Then came the texts. "Please talk to me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I love you." He showed up at the hotel on the third day. I didn't open the door. I watched him from behind the peephole, eyes red, holding a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. I stood silently, frozen, until he finally walked away. Then came Sarah's messages. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Em. We didn't plan it, it just happened. I still love you. You're my sister. Just happened." Like love was a puddle she accidentally stepped in. Like betrayal was a stumble she didn't see coming. I wanted to scream. Instead, I curled into the hotel bed and cried for the life I thought I had, the one that was gone now. Grief came in waves, first disbelief, then anger, then shame. I felt humiliated, gutted from the inside out. I blamed myself, then blamed them, then circled back to myself again. I barely ate. I watched old videos of Daniel and me, masochistically torturing myself with memories. There was one clip from a trip to Maine. He was building a sandcastle while I laughed behind the camera. That man doesn't exist anymore, I told myself. Maybe he never did. Every emotion, rage, sorrow, humiliation, sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't remove. I didn't know how to breathe through it, only how to survive minute by minute. Hour by hour. One thing became clear, though, like a hard truth rising from the rubble. They hadn't just betrayed me. They dismantled me. And now, I had to find out who I was without them. Grief isn't linear. It doesn't politely move from denial to anger to acceptance. It loops. It drags you back just when you think you're standing. Some mornings I woke up feeling light again, like maybe I could breathe without Daniel in my lungs. Other mornings, I cried before my feet touched the floor. Therapy was Maya's idea. She all but dragged me to the appointment. "You don't need to be fixed," she said. "But you deserve to feel heard." The first session, I barely spoke. The therapist, a quiet woman named Dr. Kelman, asked gentle questions. I stared at the ceiling and gave her half sentences. But the second time, I brought my journal. I'd begun writing everything, pages and pages of pain, confusion, fury. At night in the hotel, I spilled words I couldn't say out loud. I don't know who I am without him. Why wasn't I enough? She was my sister. She knew all my wounds, and still chose to slice me open. Journaling gave shape to the chaos. My therapist encouraged me to feel every stage, rage, grief, humiliation, not to suppress it, but to let it teach me something. Slowly, I stopped being afraid of my own sadness. I took a leave of absence from work. My boss was understanding, surprisingly so. With no meetings, no deadlines, no one expecting anything from me, I wandered. I started taking long solo hikes, letting my legs carry me where my mind couldn't. I found solace in quiet forests, the sound of my breath syncing with the rustle of leaves. I didn't answer calls. I didn't owe anyone my time. For the first time in years, I was choosing me. I revisited parts of myself I'd left behind in marriage. I pulled out my old painting supplies from storage and filled canvases with color, blues and reds and blacks that screamed louder than I ever could. I read poetry again, the kind that stings in your throat. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs ached, and then I ran more. Maya was always there. She dropped by with takeout and crime novels, and sat with me in silence when the days were heavy. We didn't always talk about Daniel or Sarah. Sometimes we talked about nothing. It helped. One night, while flipping through old journals, I stumbled on something from 3 years ago, a note to myself about Daniel forgetting an important appointment. I'd written, "He's so stressed. I shouldn't have gotten upset." Another entry from a year ago mentioned how he dismissed my desire to adopt when trying for a baby failed. I'd written, "Maybe I'm too emotional." I read those pages with new eyes. Not angry ones, just honest. The cracks had always been there. I just didn't want to see them. Because love makes you blind, and loyalty keeps your eyes closed. My recovery wasn't fast. It wasn't pretty. But it was mine. And in the mess, I started to feel something surprising: power. I didn't need Daniel's validation. I didn't need Sarah's remorse. I needed clarity. And I was finally getting it. What hurt the most wasn't just what Sarah and Daniel did, it was how the world reacted to it. How quickly things stopped being about right and wrong and became about comfort and image. As though betrayal could be softened, spun, or even justified if it looked polished enough. The split in my family was immediate. My mother was fierce, shockingly so. "You don't owe anyone a second of your forgiveness," she said, gripping my hand during a visit. "What they did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And they made it over and over." She stopped speaking to Sarah. She took down the childhood photos on her mantle that featured the two of us smiling in matching dresses. "I can't look at her and not think of what she stole from you," she whispered once, tearfully. My father, on the other hand, took a different route. "He's still your husband," he reminded me. "And Sarah is still your blood. Family doesn't throw each other away over a lapse in judgment." I stared at him in disbelief. A lapse in judgment. She's carrying his child. That child is your niece or nephew. And this is messy, yes. But families survive worse. I didn't answer. Some silences are louder than screams. Family gatherings stopped happening. Birthdays passed quietly. Holidays became battlegrounds of invitation lists and awkward text threads. Relatives picked sides, some cut Sarah off entirely, calling her shameless, ungrateful, vile. Others whispered things like, "Maybe Emily was too focused on work," or, "Daniel looked lonely for a long time." As if loneliness justified deceit. I learned that people often rush to rationalize betrayal when the truth is too uncomfortable. And then there was the town. We weren't celebrities, but in our suburban circle of country clubs, PTA meetings, and cozy brunch cafes, drama traveled faster than wildfire. I became the whispered name in yoga class. The woman cashiers gave pitiful smiles to. The one who got cheated on by her husband, with her own sister. Maya called it a soap opera no one asked for. It was worse when I saw them in public. Daniel and Sarah didn't hide. Within weeks, she had moved into his townhouse. I spotted them once outside the farmer's market, her baby bump visible under a floral dress, his arm protectively around her waist. They looked like a couple out of a maternity ad. People smiled at them. Sarah posted photos online. New beginnings, baby bottle, sparkling heart, #blessed, #lovey soon expected. I wanted to be furious, to scream. But I didn't. I refused to fuel the fire they'd lit. I chose silence, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wanted my dignity to speak louder. There's a quiet strength in choosing not to perform pain for people who crave spectacle. I could have confronted them. Could have exposed more. Could have shouted my grief until the whole town echoed it back. But instead, I held my head high, kept my silence, and kept moving forward. Because while they were playing house in a lie they built from broken vows, I was busy building something real from the ashes. 6 months after my world collapsed, I packed what was left of my old life into 3 boxes and 2 suitcases and moved to a new city. No one helped me carry them, not Daniel, not Sarah, not anyone who wanted to, just talk it out. Only Maya was there, like she always had been, standing by the U-Haul with 2 iced coffees and a fresh start. The apartment wasn't big, but it was mine. The walls were bare, the furniture secondhand, and I loved it. I painted the bedroom a soft sage green. I placed sunflowers on the kitchen windowsill. I finally slept without waking in tears. A few weeks later, I started a new job in marketing at a mid-sized design firm. Fresh faces. No one who knew my name, my history, or the betrayal that followed me like a shadow. I introduced myself simply as Emily, not Emily, whose husband got her sister pregnant. Just Emily. That's where I met Aiden. He was a graphic designer. Soft-spoken, thoughtful, the kind of man who held doors without making a show of it and listened, really listened, when people talked. He didn't try to flirt or fix me. He just existed quietly at the edge of my world, offering calm where there had once only been chaos. We had lunch together a few times, talked about music and books. He recommended a poetry collection that made me cry, in a good way. For the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel fragile. I didn't feel like someone broken waiting to be fixed. I wasn't ready for love. And Aiden never pushed for it. But for the first time, I felt peace. And that was more valuable than romance. One night, after rereading some of my old journals, I opened a blank Google Doc and began typing. I titled it, Betrayed by Blood and Vows, A Story of Survival. It started as a letter to myself. Then it grew into a post. Then another. I bought a domain and started a blog. I didn't name names, I didn't need to. The emotions were universal. I wrote about heartbreak, betrayal, grief, family fractures, forgiveness I didn't know, and healing I never thought possible. People began to find me. Women and men from around the world emailed, commented, shared. I thought I was alone. Your words gave me the strength to leave. Thank you for telling the story I couldn't. My pain had a purpose now. It wasn't just something I survived, it was something I could share. Every week, I posted a new entry. How to survive seeing them happy. Forgiveness is not a door, it's a window you open when you're ready. Healing isn't pretty, but it's real. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into silence. I stopped avoiding the parts of my story that made people uncomfortable. And as I grew, so did my courage. So did my freedom. I still had moments of sadness. Sometimes I'd hear a song or see a photo that cracked me open again. But the difference now was that I knew how to put myself back together. Piece by piece. Word by word. Step by step. I didn't need Daniel's love. I didn't need Sarah's guilt. I had myself, and that was more than enough. For the first time in a long, long while, I felt whole. It was early spring when Sarah messaged me again. The notification popped up while I was replying to blog comments, her name still saved in my phone, though I'd never looked at it in months. My chest tightened before I even read the message. Emily. I know I have no right. But I'm struggling. I'm scared. I don't know who else to talk to. She was due in a few weeks. I knew from whispers, the occasional photo someone forwarded, or articles I avoided but couldn't unsee. And despite everything, despite the betrayal, the rage, the irreversible fracture, I agreed to meet her. Once. We sat in a small cafe near my new place. I picked the spot on purpose, neutral, unfamiliar, a place that held no memories. She walked in slowly, visibly pregnant, her face pale, exhausted. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood so boldly at my birthday dinner to drop a bomb on my life. I'm not here for drama, I said before she sat down. Say what you came to say. Sarah fidgeted with her mug. I've made the worst mistake of my life. I said nothing. Just listened. Daniel, he's different now. Distant. Cold. He barely touches me. Sometimes I think he resents me. This baby, she faltered, tears pooling in her eyes, was never meant to come into a world like this. I watched her struggle for words, guilt all over her face. I thought I loved him. I thought it meant something. But now I realize I destroyed everything that ever meant anything to me, for nothing. I looked at her, my sister, my betrayer, the girl I used to braid hair with and share secrets with late into the night. I should have felt sorry. I didn't. What I felt was clarity. You chose him, I said quietly, knowing who he was. Now you live with that truth. She cried. I didn't. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. I hope you're a better mother than you were a sister, I said calmly, rising from my seat. Good luck, Sarah. I walked away. Not with anger, but with peace. Some wounds don't need to be healed. They just need to stop bleeding. A week later, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. Emily. I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I miss you. I miss us. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Please, can we talk? No. The answer was simple, resolute, unmoving. He tried again days later, this time showing up outside my office. He looked thinner. Lost. There was no Sarah this time, just a man clinging to the version of me he never truly appreciated when he had me. I still love you, he said, eyes pleading. I looked at him for a long time. Not the man I used to know. Not the man I once dreamed of growing old with. But a stranger wrapped in old skin. No, I said simply. You don't. You just miss the parts of me that made you feel whole. He stood frozen, as if expecting more. There's nothing left to say, Daniel, I added. You didn't lose me when you slept with my sister. You lost me the moment you looked at her and thought I wouldn't find out. I turned and walked away, calm and unshaken. Because I finally knew the truth I had ignored for years. I never truly had Daniel's full heart. And now that mine was healing. I no longer needed his. The day I signed the divorce papers felt less like an ending and more like a release. The courthouse was quiet, the sun filtering gently through the tall windows. As the clerk slid the stack of papers across the counter, I took a deep breath and smiled, a real, unguarded smile. It was a smile that belonged to someone who had survived the storm and learned to dance in the rain. I signed my name with steady hands, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Freedom tasted like ink on paper and the soft rustle of finality. Weeks later, I stood under bright lights at a community center filled with strangers who had never met me but somehow knew my story. My voice trembled at first, but as I shared my journey of betrayal, grief, and ultimately healing, the room grew silent, attentive. Faces reflected pain, hope, and recognition. I realized my story wasn't just mine, it was theirs too. That night, after the event, I started a podcast called Truth After Trust. It wasn't about sensationalizing pain but about giving voice to the quiet strength that blooms after heartbreak. I invited guests, therapists, survivors, advocates, to share wisdom and stories of resilience. The messages flooded in. People told me how the podcast helped them face their own betrayals without shame or silence. And amidst all this, Aiden and I remained close, not rushed, not forced, but a steady presence. We met for coffee, shared books and music, and sometimes, in the soft glow of twilight, our hands brushed. But I knew my heart wasn't ready to leap, only to mend and grow. One morning, I found myself walking along the beach at sunrise. The sky was a watercolor blend of golds and pinks, the waves gently caressing the shore. The cool sand sifted between my toes as I breathed in the salty air. I whispered to the wind, to the dawn, to the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. This was never the end, it was my beginning. And with that, I stepped forward, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who reclaimed her story, her strength, and her soul.